Thanks so much for joining us this week. Nice to have your company alongside us. Plenty to discuss, of course. Manchester United, what a night for them last night in Istanbul. Incredible story. What a developing story that might be for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Let's see how this week pans out, but plenty to reflect back upon. An amazing week again for Diogo Jota at Liverpool. And let's talk about Harry Kane and Mo Salah. A few, it's really got people talking this week, really, about, cheating, diving, winning penalties, being professional, that sort of thing, really. So plenty to discuss and digest with my guests today. Delighted that I'm joined by my colleague, our Manchester man, David McDonnell. So did we see last night coming? Is that why we got him on specially on board? Or maybe we're just clairvoyant. Andy Dunn, the chief sports writer of the Daily Mirror, and Jeremy Cross, double cross, chief sports writer of the Daily Star. Delighted to have you with us, guys. There's only one place to start, really, and that has to be Manchester United on the back of that remarkable defeat to Istanbul. I don't really think anyone saw it coming, particularly, did they? Dave, let's start with you. What did you make of it? I mean, I don't think anyone did see that result coming, did they? I mean, that first goal was crazy. It just seemed a calamitous night for Solskjaer, didn't it?
Oh, it was Crossy. You're right. No one saw that coming. I mean, Istanbul, Turkish champions, but they hadn't, scored a goal or even picked up a point in the first two Champions League games. So, United had really done the hard work in the previous two fixtures. That amazing win away to PSG, and then of course beating RB Leipzig 5-0. PSG last season's beaten finalists, Leipzig beaten semi-finalists. So really the hard work had been done, and really, whilst no away game in Europe can be considered a gimme, you would have expected United to, with the quality they've got and the players they've got back fit and available to play, you'd have expected them to go there and win. And it was just, it was such a shambolic performance. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. As you said, the defending for the first goal, the lack of defending. I saw Rio Ferdinand, was it Paul Scholes said it was like under 10s defending. I mean, it's just basic principles of defending, basic stuff. And of course, you leave Matic, trailing Demba Ba. He's not renowned for his pace, but I mean, you always leave a man or two back, to sort of be wary of the counter attack when you're taking the corner. And of course, that was a shambles. Of course, the second goal as well was a poor one to concede. I mean, Mata gets a lot of stick for his poor first touch, which sets up the break for the goal. But it was a poor pass, a looping pass from Bruno Fernandes, who had another poor game. I mean, he was excellent, from January onwards last season, but he's not had the best of starts this season. So yeah, there's loads of problems for Solskjaer. I mean, the Champions League has really been his salvation. If he hadn't beaten PSG and RB Leipzig, you look at the Premier League, and he may well have been gone already. So that was really keeping a gloss over the really poor Premier League form. But they've got a massive game now at Everton on Saturday, which he has to win. I know we talk in our industry, and people talk about must-win games, but that is the definition of a must-win game, because they've already lost 3 in the Premier League, all at home at Old Trafford. They cannot afford to lose further ground. They're down in 15th. So, yeah, it's a massive, massive game.
Jeremy, you've written a lot about United, Solskjaer, and also Pochettino. I mean, Pochettino probably placed a job advert really for himself, didn't he, on Sky on Monday night? Where do you think we are with the manager and his future now, and what might happen?
Well, I'm led to believe that United have sounded out Pochettino recently. They've denied it, obviously, but of course they would deny that, because obviously it looks like they're going behind his back. I think the issue is, obviously, Woodward's appointed 3 managers in recent years, and none of them have worked out. In Moyes, Van Gaal, and Mourinho, so he will be very loath to sack Solskjaer, simply because he's got, he's a legendary figure at the club for obvious reasons, and he's popular with the players, and he's a likable guy. And also, if he sacks him, it will mean he's admitting to another mistake of the highest order in terms of managerial appointment. So that's probably what's holding him back at the minute. But every week that goes by, you just think they're going nowhere under Solskjaer. He's had 101 games in charge. And I don't know about Dave, what Dave thinks about it, but I just don't see any identity in the team. And that's he's been in charge nearly 2 years now. He's not stamped his authority on the side. They've made some strange signings. Some of the players that he has signed are not being treated very well. It just all seems a bit haphazard, and he doesn't know what his best formation is. He chops and changes the team a lot. So look, if I was Ed Woodward and Pochettino's out there and available for nothing, I would be pressing the button. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. I think they need someone with Pochettino's authority to take them on to that next level, because I don't think Solskjaer is capable of doing that.
Yeah, Andy, I know it's a bugbear of mine, but I just think Solskjaer is getting such an easy ride by comparison. If it were a different manager, I think he'd be getting absolute pelters now. But because there's so many former teammates in the media, I just think he's getting a free hit. Yeah, it's always the player's fault. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, the distinctive thing about me and Jeremy were at Old Trafford on Sunday, and it's funny when you're there covering the game, and you're thinking to yourself, where the headline's going to be. It's going to be on that guy sat in the gantry, Roy Keane. He's going to come out with his usual stuff and et cetera, et cetera. And sure enough, it was scattergun stuff. He had to go at everyone apart from Ole. And, he said, listen, these players are going to get Solskjaer the sack. That was his line, which... Well, actually, he has to take responsibility for those players. It's him who's not starting Cavani. It's him who hasn't started Van der Beek. It's him who picks the team. It's him who sets up a defensive formation that allowed that first goal to happen last night. And in the end, that's his responsibility. The buck stopped with him. It reminded me. I don't know. You guys remember in 2010 in Bloemfontein when Fabio Capello left Gareth Barry back as the lone man. And Mesut Ozil ran around him as though he was a traffic cone and scored Germany's third goal. We had Ashley Cole inside, if you remember. And Ashley Cole was, the quickest man in the field. Well, leave him back. He left Gareth Barry. And Gareth Barry, great player there he is and was, he wasn't the man to be left back there, a bit like leaving Matic back there. And that has to come down to the coach. That's just training ground standard stuff. I understand that, but yes, John. I think he does escape from the pundits who are ex-United. What stands out for me is when they say about Ed Woodward will maybe think about it looks bad on him if he sacks Ole. I just don't get now the connection between Woodward, the recruitment department, and Solskjaer. I mean, so I've got a big bugbear about Cavani. He's the most expensive free transfer since Alexis Sanchez. Fortune spent on him. He's supposed to be world class. He's supposed to be still hungry. Well, one way to find out is start him in a football team. And he hasn't even started the game yet. Van der Beek, £40 million. He's only reluctantly starting him now, and that strikes me as though that's a manager who didn't particularly want those two players. And maybe he wanted, I'm pretty sure he wanted, by the way, every step of the way for the last 2 years, he wanted Erling Haaland and hasn't got him. It strikes me that there is no joined up thinking between Solskjaer and the board, and that's what you get. But I was shocked last night was poor, but let's not forget how bad they were on Sunday. I mean, Arsenal were okay. They were disciplined. They were organised. They had a plan. But United were terrible, absolutely terrible. And they looked as though they had, and there he had a chance to change things. It clearly wasn't working. The formation was not working. The diamond wasn't working. The personnel were not working. And he didn't even change at half time. And he waited pretty much until Arsenal had scored and then changed it. And he just looked as though he's basically just scrambling around for answers that he can't find at the moment.
No, sure. Disco, there's a couple of players that I just wanted to mention. And I mean, Dean Henderson started last night. What was Ole's reasoning behind that? And also then, Harry Maguire, the drop in his form has been, alarming to say the least, hasn't it? Not just, generally, I think, not just the last few games.
Yeah, I mean, with Henderson, I think obviously, he's come in and he wants Henderson to challenge De Gea and give De Gea that competition that he's not really had since he joined United. I think the thinking last night was that they don't have a cup game, I think I'm right, until December now, I think. So obviously De Gea is going to play the Premier League games, he's going to play the Champions League games, and having won the first two and given themselves, some breathing space in terms of needing to get a result last night, I think he felt that was the opportune time to give Henderson a start. And I thought, you couldn't blame him for either goal. He was left exposed by the defence on both occasions, and he's done well in the EFL Cup games that he's played in. So I think that was the thinking there. And I say you can't apportion too much blame at all on Henderson for the goals they conceded. With Maguire, I mean, it was interesting. He was put up by United for the pre-match press conference along with Solskjaer. I was going to say that
been with United season.
yeah, exactly. I mean that kind of mirrored their really poor start to the season because, as you know, and maybe the viewers and listeners don't know, it was obviously conducted on Zoom, but Solskjaer and Maguire couldn't hear us. Which, for a club of Manchester United stature, to not be able to get a Zoom call right, I mean, it just typifies the sort of, the dysfunctionality that's sort of, beset the club at the moment. But Maguire, I mean, I asked him about, the summer he's had, obviously, with the arrest and conviction in Mykonos and the fallout from that. And I said, look, how hard has it been for you to cope with that and to focus on football? And I said to him in a kind of sympathetic way, I said, it would surely be hard for anybody in any walk of life, let alone a high-profile footballer, playing in front of the world's media and millions of people watching around the world, to cope with that in their daily life, going through such a trauma like that. So how has it been for you? And he kind of, as you'd expect, I guess, he kind of, trotted out the line, I'm fully focused. Yeah, it was a difficult summer, but I'm fully focused. But, he's clearly not fully focused. I think has been a hangover from what happened in Mykonos. You saw that with the sending off for England as well against Denmark. He was particularly stung, by, I think, Roy Keane's comments about the lack of leaders. That was put to him as well. And he replied by saying there are plenty of leaders here. But I think also Maguire has played, virtually every single game for United in the last sort of, season and a bit, since joining. And I think, people said, he should have been taken out the firing line by Solskjaer to give him time to regroup mentally. Others in the game, pundits were saying, play through it. Solskjaer obviously chose to play through it. I think it looks like he could do with a break. But the trouble is, United haven't got the depth of centre backs in terms of quality, in terms of reliability, that allows him to do that. That allows Solskjaer to take Maguire out. Lindelof had a back injury last night. Tuanzebe came in, but he's been out for 10 months, 11 months. Had that great game, away to PSG. But he's obviously suffering from that lack of playing time in recent months, and that's bound to catch up with the player. So I think Solskjaer potentially would have liked to have rested Maguire, although he won't admit that publicly, and maybe taken him out the firing line to give him a physical and mental rest. But he just can't do it at the moment.
No, sure. Jeremy, I was just going to ask you another aspect of Roy Keane's remarkable rant from Old Trafford on Sunday. Remarkable in my eyes, only because it was a remarkable achievement to talk about a game for so long with so much passion and yet not include the manager in any sort of criticism, which I think, must say, devalues him as a pundit, really. But anyway,
you're not a fan of Solskjaer, are you?
It's not that. Do you know? I actually think he comes across as a really nice guy, and I'd love to see the story unfold and it turn into be a romantic one and succeed. Who can knock Solskjaer for what he did in the second half of last season? Yeah. But come on, this is Man United. You can't be in 15th and then also excuse the manager of absolve him of any blame. That's my point. But I think that the Keane did touch on an interesting point about the motivation of players. Now, I put that a lot down to the manager. And he questioned the players and the individuals and the motivation. Can they motivate themselves? Where is the line, Jeremy, do you think? Who's to blame on that?
Ultimately, a team are a reflection of the manager out there in any sport, really, not just football. So, like Dunny said, on Sunday, the body language was so shocking. And at the end, there was quite a telling moment because Pogba had obviously conceded the penalty, which gave Arsenal the win. And he just moped off towards the end. He didn't shake anyone's hand. But what was telling about it was, not one teammate went up to him to console him or put their arm around him or say, listen, don't worry about it, mate. Let's move on. And you see that a lot in other sides after games. If players go to someone and try and make them feel better if they can. He was just left to mope off on his own towards the dressing room. I thought, you know what? That's not a good sign, that. It just makes you think, look, people at United keep telling me that he's the popular guy in the dressing room and all that. And I'm sure he is, but I thought that was quite telling on Sunday. And, that's not good to see if you're a United fan, because there's clearly a discord between Pogba and some players. But look, Solskjaer played under probably one of the greatest motivators there's ever been in Fergie, who never struggled to get the team fired up for big games. And Solskjaer clearly can't do it. And obviously he's got Mike Phelan alongside him, who I'm still trying to work out what Phelan actually does at that place, to be honest. Probably getting paid 500 grand a year for sticking the cones out and standing in the technical area, waving his arms about, shouting instructions. It's just all a bit too nicey. Do you know what I mean? They don't come across as tough. I like Solskjaer. I think he's a decent bloke, but he just doesn't strike me as being that sort of real hard-nut manager that you need sometimes when times are tough.
No, sure. Andy, where do you see it going from here? Because United, long trip midweek, straight back into it, Saturday lunchtime, Goodison Park. It's pretty unforgiving, isn't it?
Pretty unforgiving. Probably not as unforgiving as it would be, obviously, with the crowd. Everton have had some good results against United at Goodison Park with the crowd. But, listen, where does it go? I agree with the guys. I mean, it's hard to see long-term how Solskjaer can be the answer. I just think that he suffers in comparison. For example, you're talking about the stature of United, and you look at the stature of the club, and then the manager. You look at Liverpool. I mean, everyone suffers in comparison to Klopp, but there really is such a stark difference. I mean, Jeremy talks about motivating the players, and you've got a man there at Liverpool, a Man United's fierce rivals for so many years, who is just peerless in the way he motivates players. You look at that team when they go out, they just don't know how to get beat, apart from at Villa Park. But they don't know, they don't know when they're beaten. They do all the things that Jeremy says didn't happen at United on Sunday, in terms of geeing each other up and supporting each other. And that comes from the manager. And big clubs have big name managers. And unfortunately, United haven't got that. They haven't got what you would call a, part of that managerial elite. He's not, I mean, whereas Klopp is, Guardiola is, Jose Mourinho is, and then you go abroad, and Ancelotti is to a certain extent, and then et cetera, et cetera. And it's just hard to see now after so many games. How many games, Premier League games, are in charge? 100, is it now?
Yeah, well, it was 100 games overall, wasn't it, on Sunday, so it's 101.
And you just wonder, for every good performance, there's a really poor performance that just is not becoming of Manchester United. So, and as I say, everything just seems so obvious with Pochettino out there and sort of flagging himself up on Monday. It just wouldn't surprise you. I bet you couldn't get odds on it.
No, I think, Crossy, the other interesting thing is that one way of looking at it is, would any of the other Premier League teams swap Solskjaer for their boss?
No.
And you'd have to say no. Well, that tells you everything about standing. And as you said, nice guy as he is, that's not the criteria for taking Manchester United back to the top, which is his remit. I mean, the other interesting thing is that he has shown himself in big games, if you like, to have a knack of getting something out of them. He did the double over City last season, did the double over Chelsea, I think, in the Premier League. Obviously, the PSG game. I think the season before last, I'm a bit confused now with all the dates, but he was United were the first team to take points off Liverpool with that 1-1 draw at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
So he has got, obviously, some tactical nous. And I do think that players are letting him down. I think also as well, another point which I haven't touched upon is that he wasn't backed in the transfer market in the summer. And I think that's a real factor here. We know, I think Dunny touched upon the fact that he wanted Haaland, he wanted Sancho. United took the stance that they weren't prepared to pay what Dortmund wanted for Sancho in the post-COVID transfer market. That's up to them. They felt that it wasn't a realistic value, 120 million or 110 million, and that's fine. But you look at Frank Lampard, who by comparison, I don't know what Chelsea's spend was, but it was close to 200 million, I think. He got the backing, signed all the players, and you're seeing the fruits of that now. You're seeing Chelsea. Was it unbeaten in 10, 5 clean sheets in a row, really pushing on. Whereas I think there's an argument to suggest, yes, Solskjaer might not be, as Dunny said, I think we all agree, he's not the long-term solution. I think you need a coach with a bigger pedigree than Solskjaer and a proven track record. Yeah. But I do think he was badly let down by the board in the summer in the market, and I think a lot of United fans have expressed that same view as well.
If you sorry, Joe, just quickly, I think that's a great point. Is that both those managers qualified for the Champions League immediately. Chelsea said, right, who do you want? This and Frank's identified everyone, got them, done them early, middle, late, got everyone he wanted, And Solskjaer, I mean, messing around, Van der Beek in, and then Cavani, at the last knockings. That is just, I totally agree. He wasn't backed, and it's so muddled. Some of the thinking I find, for United. Dean Henderson, what's that all about? Dean Henderson sort of comes back, and they sign into a big new contract. And then Henderson actually said to us, didn't he? Remember on an England Zoom call? Well, listen, I'm not going there to be. Number 2. I will be number 1. Well, he's not going to be number 1. No. So now United have got a prize asset, sat there doing nothing. Basically, it's just to me, it strikes us. We've all had the briefings with Ed Woodward about how they go about their recruitment. And we're meant to be, convinced that they have actually got a structure and a plan, but it doesn't look like at the moment, does it?
And I think also. Sorry, Crossy. Just very, very briefly on the transfer situation. 4 of the 5 transfers were done on deadline day. This has been the longest, longest transfer window in history, I think. And yet, still, United were sort of grubbing around, getting deals done for Tellez, Cavani, and the 2 young wingers on deadline day. I mean, it just beggars belief. It goes back to the point we've all made that doesn't seem to be any coherent transfer strategy there whatsoever.
Jeremy.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say. No, Disco touched on this earlier about the failure to back him in the summer window. I think that's quite a damning omen, because if you remember back to 2018, they did the same with Mourinho. Were you on that tour, Disco, when Mourinho was seething about it, wasn't he? And he pulled you guys down the corridor and let rip at Woodward.
Yeah, I mean, that
not getting the players that he wanted, and he was gone by, and then he had a bad run of results, and he was gone before Christmas. So, we've seen history repeat itself in a lot of ways.
You're absolutely right, Crossy, because what's interesting as well, looking at previous transfer windows, every season after they qualify for the Champions League, United's transfer spend halves.
It's like the Glazers are saying, we're happy to be back in the competition.
Exactly.
Get the revenue from that, but we're not going to take that next step and sign the players that can actually make us go deep in the competition and even try and win it. Heaven forbid.
Yeah, and it's the same mistakes or the same strategy being repeated over and over again. And it'll happen with Solskjaer as well. He will eventually lose his job, and maybe Pochettino or whoever else will come in.
You've got to also ask the question though. Now, would I'm told he would take the job at United if he was offered it, but God, you'd have to. If you're Pochettino, you'd be looking at United thinking, is this the right move for me? I mean,
you want some guarantees, don't you? Because honestly, guys, it's a great point, isn't it? Imagine sort of kind of, you play fantasy football manager. That's something I never do, by the way. But basic with Man United, you've got Haaland up front. That was doable. You've got Sancho on the wing, doable. You could even look at say Jude Bellingham, doable. And Thiago Silva. I mean, he's at Chelsea now. He's signed on a free transfer. What a difference he's made.
Could have signed Partey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get some strategy together. This is Man United. Yes, everyone's been through difficult times. We understand that. We know that. But why pursue Sancho for so long? I mean, that one is the most bizarre one. You knew that Dortmund's price. Why? Leave it alone. If you're not prepared to go there, leave it alone. Look somewhere else. And that to me epitomised their lack of thinking. I just want to touch on Chelsea, guys, before we sort of move on. I was at the Stamford Bridge last night. It's 5 clean sheets. Mendy, not a conventional goalkeeper, but some good saves. Thiago Silva has really settled that defence down. Timo Werner, again, a really good summer signing. I know we talk a lot about Frank Lampard and kind of the jury's out on this panel. I'm massively in favour, others not quite so convinced. But it's really good, Jeremy, isn't it? I think about sort of the direction that the club is going in, Lampard is steering them towards.
Yeah, look, I think they're unbeaten in 11 games now, Chelsea, in all comps. So they're doing well in the Champions League. I know they've got probably, compared to some other English teams, they've got probably the easiest group out of the draw, but you've still got to win the games. And get through, because the expectation is so high at Chelsea. Look, Lampard, I think the jury's still out on him, isn't it? Really, he's a young manager. Like I think we said last week on the podcast, he's in a privileged position, I think, to have that job at such a young age and with such an experience. But he's a club legend, and he's signed a lot of players. He's been given the money to spend. He's admitted himself they've got a challenge for things this season, including the title. I'm not sure they will, to be honest, but it takes time for players to settle down into new systems, and he's still playing with it a bit, I think, really. But I think the signs are good. Werner's starting to score goals now. He's got that remarkable pace, which is a godsend for any forward. So he's guaranteed to get regular goals for Chelsea. So that's something he doesn't have to worry about. Like you say, Silva at the back, he's a world-class player. So you know what you're getting there. So I think I'd prefer to make a judgment on it maybe in the new year to see where they're at then. But yeah, the signs look good. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, Liverpool, Andy, on Sunday, Diogo Jota, does he start ahead of, Roberto Firmino?
Well, on form, you would select him ahead of Firmino. I actually have a hunch. Everyone expects Jota to start. I have a hunch that actually no, he'll stick with Firmino. I thought it was very interesting. Klopp's comments after saying, "Listen, don't be having to go Roberto Firmino just because Jota's come in and scored a hat-trick." He said, we wouldn't be in the Champions League if it wasn't for Roberto Firmino. Yeah. And Klopp is an absolute brilliant man-manager. We all know that. A fantastic man-manager. I think it would send a really, really a bad message to Firmino if Klopp left him out. It would be ruthless. But, bear in mind that it's a Liverpool team that have had their good days at City and have had their bad days at City. And when they've had the good days there, it's basically those three players, that triumvirate of Mane, Salah and Firmino has served Klopp so well, has served Liverpool so well that I think for such a big game, I think he'll play them. And I think, he'll be quite happy for Jota to come on, after 60 minutes and have an impact. I just think that for this game, he'll stick with those three. He'll have faith in Firmino. His man management will suggest to him, listen, I don't want to disenfranchise him at this stage. And I think he'll start him. Having said that, Jota, I mean, what a guy to come on from the bench. I mean, I still don't quite understand that deal, why Wolves decided to let him go, for a fee that wasn't exactly, fortunes. And it's a great signing. And again, I mean, without going back to Manchester United, again, it's how they suffer in comparison. Liverpool, everything Liverpool's transfer department, headed by Michael Edwards, touches seems to turn to gold. They can just do no wrong. Yeah.
Do you know what? We've got an unashamed Wolves fan on our staff, haven't we? Alex Richards, who works on Mirror Football, and basically, it was interesting that he was saying the other day about kind of when Jota is hot, he's hot. Yes, it's the run of games without that basically is, that maybe make the weakness. Maybe that's a factor in the price, but he looks sensational at the moment.
Don't forget, Johnny, he wasn't, there were games when he wasn't starting for Wolves. Yeah. So it's not as though, he came as an absolute established world-class star. We all knew he was very, very good. But again, it's just, it's just Klopp. Everything he touches, everything he touches just turns out right. He can lose Virgil van Dijk and then they can go on a run of half a dozen wins or whatever it is. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was just also going to touch on the argument of the week, guys, which is, I mean, we'll have a good chat on this one because I do think it's sort of kind of worthwhile. I was at the game on Sunday, actually, where Harry Kane, fouled or otherwise, Adam Lallana. Then the previous day, you have Mo Salah going down like a sack of potatoes. I thought it was a clear foul, by the way. Right. The line between diving, cheating, and being professional, winning a penalty. Break it down for us, Disco. Where are we on those?
Well, I agree with you, Crossy. I don't think there's any doubt that was a foul on Salah. Where it becomes dubious, if you like, or grey area, is his reaction to that foul, because I don't think that was a natural reaction. Anybody could agree that was a natural reaction. The way he sort of allowed himself to fall, he was obviously making sure the referee was absolutely certain that contact had been made, and the kind of trajectory, the way he sort of leapt and threw himself to the ground, that's what sparked this debate. And I think the interesting thing is you have to sort of don't see these two things as mutually exclusive. Yes, it can be a foul, which I think it was, and I think most people would agree it was. But yes, Salah could also have dived as well, to accentuate that foul, to accentuate that, and forwards do it all the time. I think we saw it as well you mentioned the Harry Kane and Adam Lallana one, but we saw it with Pogba and Bellerin. That was a foul, but I think Bellerin, again, look, he felt the contact, and players, when they feel the contact, their first reaction is to make sure that the officials are aware of that contact, and so they accentuate the fall. That's where this issue has arisen. Salah's wasn't a natural reaction to the contact; it was, simulation, if you like. But then you come to the situation. Well, can you award a penalty for a foul? Which okay, yes, it was, but also except there was simulation. I mean, I don't know how you would sort of deal with that. I mean, could you say at the same time it's a foul, but also simulation? So yeah, I think players have always done. I mean, I remember Glenn Hoddle, before the '98 World Cup, telling the players, look, we've got to be a bit more cynical in terms of the dark arts. We've got to be a bit more, less sort of English, British, if you like, and these great upstanding moral values, and we've got to go down like players on the continent do, and really take advantage of that fact. And so I think we're seeing more of that now, and that's obviously why the yellow card for simulation was brought in, when it was. But I do think it makes the job of a referee harder, because you have players who, yes, they can be fouled, but also they can be trying to con the ref at the same time, or making sure the referee is absolutely no doubt that they've been fouled.
Yeah, Jeremy, on the Harry Kane one, I thought, and I've seen various clips since that basically, I mean, there was another one on Cresswell where he backs in. Isn't it an old centre forwards trick, just to back into the defender, use his body to kind of then protect the ball in the air, which means then the defender has to clamber over him, basically, on the ground or off it, and then that provokes the foul. Isn't that the most basic centre forwards point of play? I just think that Kane, I think, has had undue criticism for doing the oldest trick in the book.
Well, look, in the 70s and 80s, number 9s did that every week relentlessly, and it must. I mean, look, off the top of my head, I can't think who the master of it was, but there'd be countless examples. That is, if you were a manager, if you're Mourinho, you want Kane doing that, don't you? Because he's got the advantage. If he's fouled, it's a penalty. He's in a great position. So listen, I don't see an issue with it at all. Kane, for me, is a great number 9. I know he's been playing in a slightly different role recently, but if Disco touched on it, though, I mean, if Harry Kane went down like a sack of spuds in a World Cup semi-final to win a penalty that got us to the World Cup final, who would complain about that? I wouldn't. Would you?
No.
I mean, there is. Yeah, I have an issue with players who make a meal of things, like Salah did against West Ham. But sometimes players don't go down and when they're fouled, and what do they get from that? Sometimes it comes to nothing. They don't get what they deserve. So it's a debate that'll go on forever, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, that's the point, though, Andy, isn't it? That if Salah doesn't react, it's the clearest foul ever, in my view.
Again, I was at that game, and basically, we chat amongst ourselves to say, okay, if he doesn't go down, if he stays on his feet, does Kevin Friend give the penalty? Well, no. I mean, it's not even a debate. Kevin Friend does not give that penalty if Mo Salah stays on his feet. So in the end, that feels like the end of the argument. I think Harry Kane's different. Harry Kane's different in what should be eliminating the situation with Harry Kane. Yes, okay, centre forwards have done it, for time immemorial. Well, the thing is, VAR should cut that out, because if you look at that again on your pitch side monitors as a referee, you should not be given a penalty. Simple as that. I mean, just look at it again, and it is just not. It's not an infringement by Adam Lallana. So that's what we should be doing. So basically, okay, people who make a meal of contact and go down, basically to convince referee to remind them there's been contact, fine, that happens. But players who engineer the contact, players who actually make the contact themselves and then fall over someone's leg or do what Kane did to Lallana, they're the things that should be eliminated. And now we can eliminate them through VAR. It's as simple as that. They can be done away with. That's always my bugbear about simulation, is those people who seek out someone's leg. We all know it. And to be perfectly honest, Kane is an absolute pass master at it. I mean, he really is. I mean, he might be an English sensible, but he is an absolute pass master at doing that. I remember him doing it. I think he did Anfield once. He is great at it. Now, again, his manager will want him to do that, but now VAR can sort that out. VAR can actually decide, well, hang on a minute, you actually went looking for that contact. You went seeking out the defender's leg, or in Lallana's case, to try and get him to fall over the top of you. And I think that's easily done, and that's what should happen. I have to say, another thing is that we all say, "Oh yeah," well,
and another thing.
No, just one more thing. Him never died. One other thing is that the football's full of PR people, isn't it? I mean, they're full of. There is a gap in the market, for an honest player, a player who stays on his feet, a player who doesn't cheat. Like a cricketer who walks. You know what I mean? It would just be great if someone came along. If Salah said, "Well, you know what? I didn't get the penalty, but I stayed on my feet because it wasn't enough to put me down. And you know what? I'm an honest guy, and I'm not just going to fall to the floor as though I've just been tasered by someone in the stands." It would be nice, wouldn't it? There is a gap in the market for a nice, honest guy.
Well,
by the way, no manager would ever take them on, would they? I mean,
I was going to say, he'd be dropped.
No manager would ever take them on. It'd just be nice. A bit of honesty, a bit of old-fashioned, stiff football. They play up and play the game. And honest, walk when you nick one off to the keeper.
But we saw that with Robbie Fowler, didn't we? I can't remember what year that was. With the foul with Schmeichel, wasn't it? And he urged the referee to not give the foul because it wasn't a foul. But you're right, we don't see that kind of honesty so much these days.
No, and it's a real shame, isn't it? It's a real shame that players, basically what I just don't like is so many good players, their first instinct when they get into the penalty area is to try and basically find contact and go down, and that's it. Just and the one last thing on that from me is that if they then complain, if they are spending their entire time trying to con referees, when it goes against them, I've got no sympathy for them whatsoever. Because if you spend your entire game trying to hoodwink and con referees, when a decision goes against you, then tough. You basically made the benchmark there. That's what it's all about. And if you get done, then tough.
Danny, I'm just amazed it's taken us 38 minutes to mention VAR. We've been talking for almost 40 minutes, and it's
not mentioned VAR.
I must say, but the great thing about Sunday was, and this gets people irate, particularly sort of journalists on Twitter, when it emerges that actually VAR didn't check the foul. And nor, frankly, under the VAR rules and guidance, it shouldn't check the foul because it wasn't a clear and obvious error. It was a judgment call by the referee. But it did check, where the foul was taken. And that was exactly the same with what happened with Fabinho. Now, I know people get irate about that, but you cannot have every decision being re-refereed. Because when you have even some checked and re-refereed, you end up with the absolute farce that we did actually have at White Hart Lane with, Graham Scott, who was horrendous, a shocking referee, making an appalling performance. Frankly, he couldn't decide at one point in the second half whether he should put his right foot in front of the left. I mean, he was hopeless. And so by the end, he was relying on VAR for every decision. But it just goes to show you that basically there's just so much, subjective, there's so much of a subjective nature to decisions that, people can't decide. But I do think that the one area where I think we need to improve, I don't know whether, Jeremy, you agree with this, is that basically, if a player is nudged and tries to chase the ball, but is clearly fouled and then it goes out of play because he's been nudged, the referee and I don't know, the officials have to step in at that point, don't they? Because that's one way that it would help out on the cheating and aspect.
Yeah, look, if the player's momentum's affected, then it's a clear foul. So I don't get why it's so difficult to work out, really. We've got all the monitors in place, numerous officials covering the game. It's not hard to judge, is it? No. I was going to ask you guys, what do the Premier League meeting today and also EFL? They've both been called to account over the bailout. Basically, got to explain themselves, almost like the naughty boys in front of headmaster to MPs next week, as to why there's been no solution yet. Is the government right to do this? Should football look after itself? Why on earth hasn't this been resolved? I don't know. Who wants to jump on this one? I think part of the issue is you've got Rick Parry, formulating this master plan to, overhaul English football, which involved obviously a £250 million bailout to the EFL. That got dismissed within a week of it surfacing. So the government are looking at that, probably thinking, well, okay, they've come up with this plan to look after themselves, and then it's been shot down by those it would affect. So they're probably looking at that and thinking, well, why are we having to give them money when they operate in a game which is flooded with money? We've seen over £1 billion spent again in the window on new signings. So I just think there's a serious case of hypocrisy going on, really. But it will be amusing to see Richard Masters, the chief executive of the Premier League, go before a committee to try and explain himself. That's not going to be a comfortable experience for Masters, I can assure you.
No. Andy, what does he have to explain? What do the MPs say to him?
Well, the MPs, you know what these committees are like. That's what I really don't like about them. What these committees are full of basically grandstanding MPs, who know that it's their 15 minutes of fame, their hour in the sun when they get to get involved in Premier League football. We've seen it so many times. I guess they have to explain. Is the clubs across the country, clubs that are the heart of the community, lower league clubs, they're going to need the help. That we know they need help. And the dilemma is really where the help should come from. I would like to see it come from the Premier League, because basically I am really loath to have government involvement in it, in the sense then that's a slippery slope when they start regulating football. But if the Premier League don't, then, I think the government will have to step in and help these clubs. We can't see these clubs go to the wall. So Richard Masters will have to explain how they are going to come up with a solution that will basically ensure that none of these clubs go to the wall. And as Jeremy just said there, it's just so complicated, because the problem is, when the Premier League, quite rightly, and I know, we've all written about it, how, they have to look after themselves first. There's clubs that aren't owned by oil-rich states or by, incredibly wealthy billionaire owners. There are clubs that are probably feeling the pinch in the Premier League. So why should they, give their money away? But having said that, we then see, they're still probably going to pay about 250 million quid in agents' fees this transfer window, the same as they did in the previous two transfer windows. They're still paying players 300 grand a week, and that's where politicians and the public will look at it and go, well, what's going on? So it's incredibly complex. I just think that, and obviously we've had the complication of Project Big Picture, but, the Premier League now has to, it's really tough, but they have to come up between them with a plan that is going to basically ensure that none of these clubs go to the wall. And it's just so difficult. It really is. It's so difficult, because, of course, then they want maybe a bit of quid pro quo from the government saying, well, listen, you want us to save our clubs. You want us to help out and save football as the Premier League. But then you're going back on what was a sort of unwritten promise that by October, you'll get fans back in your stadium. Now, you'd be lucky if you have them in by next October.
Yeah. Well, one of the big bugbears, and this was really spelt out to me in the strongest possible terms by a couple of people from the EFL last week, was that under Project under Project Restart, there was a guarantee made in a room to the government that football would and the Premier League would step in and help the EFL and the League One, League Two clubs. And that is their bone of contention, that they insist that that's not them, that promise has not been undertaken. When we're talking about grandstanding, Disco, and next week on the kind of the committee, Rick Parry, I have to say, I think he's pretty damn good at it, to be honest. Is this a sort of a moral victory that he can win, or has Rick Parry, and maybe Rick Parry's standing and reputation been basically been damaged for good, really, by Project Big Picture?
Well, I think the issue here is transparency, isn't it? I think the sort of clandestine nature of the talks as well, between Rick Parry and the big six, led by Manchester United and Liverpool, was what irked a lot of the Premier League clubs, and obviously they voted unanimously. I'll get my words out in a minute against it, and you can understand what the reasons why. I think for Rick Parry, it really is a question of he had the support of the EFL clubs, in terms of the £250 million bailout, if you like, the rescue package that would have been part of Project Big Picture. But the issue for me is that you're kind of dangling that financial incentive, that financial inducement in front of clubs who are desperate for it. And I think we can all agree that Project Big Picture, despite the grandiose plans and the sort of tacit or the kind of pretense of preserving the football pyramid, was always going to put power in the hands of the big six and be to the detriment of the Football League, the whole pyramid. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, obviously Richard Masters, Greg Clark as well. He was obviously chairman of the FA. Again, it comes back to transparency. He says that he withdrew from the picture, the talks over Project Big Picture. This is Greg Clark, when it became apparent that there was a threat of a breakaway. I think what fans want and what we as journalists want and what everybody wants is transparency, is a bit of honesty from all the players involved. And I'm afraid, given the financial sums involved and given the power play involved, I don't think we're going to see that at all.
I think one thing we've learned over this whole fiasco since COVID-19 came along is that people talk for years about the football family, didn't they?
Yeah.
But it's absolutely a myth, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, we've seen football tear itself apart for the last 6 months. Obviously COVID's changed everything. It's exposed certain flaws in the game, how it's structured, how it's governed. And, we've reached a point now where actually the game does have to help itself, and it's just not been forthcoming. So anyone who still thinks that football clubs look after each other, it's absolute cobblers.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna. There you go. Straight. Told it to you straight. I'm just going to touch on briefly England squad later today. And listen, there's there's a few sort of issues sort of outstanding. Foden, Greenwood, and strikers. Perhaps now Ings is out. Who gets in there? It'll be really interesting. Obviously Reece James is out. But there's one burning issue, which is probably a question for Gareth Southgate, really. Jordan Pickford. I mean, he's obviously going to be in the squad, but does Southgate then stick with him as his number one, Andy? Or does he have to have a look at it now that he's, let's be honest here, Carlo Ancelotti laid it on the line. He is no longer the unquestionable number one at Everton, is he?
Yeah, but slightly bizarrely, John, Carlo Ancelotti also said he plays Saturday against Manchester United.
Well, I actually then thought that lent itself to the notion that he is no longer unquestionable number one, because it wasn't taking him out the firing line for one game. Carlo Ancelotti laid it on the line and said, I'm going to rotate him. Well, if you're going to rotate him, Pickford is no longer the undisputed number one.
No.
I'm not sure which is worse.
It's just, just going off on a tangent slightly. I mean, Ancelotti, for the first few games this season could do no wrong in Evertonian eyes, but even that raised a few eyebrows, I have to say. I mean, the idea that like you can take a keeper out and then say, well, but you're going to be back in for this game. So in other words, the guy who comes in, Robin Olsen, you go and have a half decent game in Newcastle, but I'm taking you back out again, which is very odd. But there you go. But just going back to the England situation, yes, I mean, Southgate sticks with him. Southgate sticks with him because, let's face it, the bottom line is that results under Southgate with Pickford in the team have been good. It's as simple as that. They've been good. He hasn't let them down really at all. There's been the odd sort of aberration you would suggest, but nothing really, really serious. And Pickford has been, and he's not the type of guy that he will allow what's happened at Everton to knock his confidence. We all know him. He's he's full of himself, basically, in a good way. So no, I'm particularly, John, as you think that the alternatives are Nick Pope, who isn't in the best form at the moment,
no,
and Dean Henderson, obviously played last night, but is not in Manchester United's first team at all in the Premier League, whereas obviously Pickford has been. So no, he sticks with him, and it's not ideal situation for Southgate, but he can always point to Pickford's body of work as England goalkeeper and say, listen, on that evidence, I don't drop him. I pick him on England form, not on club form. It's not ideal because in the past, Southgate has said he picks players on their form at the moment, certainly outfield players, but I think he can make an exception in the goalkeeping department, and that's why he'll stick with him without a doubt.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you agree with that? Because it's interesting that Andy picked up on there that I think has gone largely under the radar a bit, but Pope would be a great, sort of kind of keeper to, if he was in good form, to come in and sort of challenge. But the point is, this maybe, underlines the problem facing Pickford, is that Pope has made a couple of, big rickets recently, but because he's not England number one, because he's the challenger, it's just not highlighted in the same way, is it?
No. Look, we're back to Pickle again, are we? And Southgate, I think, Andy, I agree with a lot of what Andy just said on Pickford. He hasn't let England down. If you think of a mistake he made for England after, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, so the issue is, he is now essentially saying Pickford is going to be my number one goalkeeper at the Euros next summer. Because if he's thinking of giving someone else a chance to stake a claim for the team for the Euros, surely by now he would have given Henderson a run out or Pope, and that's not been the case. So I think we can assume, barring a complete loss of form, that he will start between the posts next summer.
I don't understand, Jeremy, why, again, and going back to something we touched on earlier in the show, is did Southgate have a conversation with Dean Henderson and say, listen, you need to be playing football this season? On his form last season, playing every game, well, apart from the ones against the club who owned him. That's another story, but I'm not going there. But, did Southgate have the conversation with him and say before, or did Henderson? We knew how much it meant to Henderson to get called up into that England senior squad. We all spoke to him, in that call. We knew how much it meant to him. But then it means that much to him. Then he must surely know that if he spends an entire season on the bench at Manchester United, he's not going to be England's keeper at Euro 2020 in 21. And that's what he is determined to be. And, so I just don't get that element to it. Southgate, I think, would like nothing more than Dean Henderson. John said there about people challenging Pickford. Dean Henderson's the man to challenge Pickford, but he needs to be playing football. And not just in an away game, in the Champions League.
I think a lot of it will boil down to what conversation Solskjaer had with Henderson about him coming back to Old Trafford. For all we know, he could have promised him more games, and and he's let him down or gone back on his word, because we all know Solskjaer is a massive fan of De Gea and has shown so much faith in him. I mean, I think De Gea should have been out of the team ages ago, really. But it's an issue. It becomes an issue for Henderson because he's not playing for either club or country. And he's very, very ambitious, is Henderson. We all know that. So he's full of himself and very confident in himself. So it's going to kill him over a long period of time.
I mean, the problem for Henderson, sorry guys, I'm back. Some technical issues there, but I'm back now. But the problem, I think, as well, touching on what Crossy just said there about Solskjaer and Henderson and the whole De Gea dynamic, is that De Gea's form has actually improved this season. I mean, I know that sounds a bit like strange given the way United have started this season, but he's actually been one of the better performers. And I think potentially, as Crossy said, that conversation with Solskjaer and Henderson was probably, I want you to come back and I want you to challenge De Gea for the number one spot in the summer. So he came back, fueled by that ambition and that sense that he could actually usurp De Gea as United's number one. And of course, it hasn't transpired that way. De Gea's form is actually, in my opinion, warranted him keeping his place ahead of Henderson. For all the England reasons and everything, I think De Gea's probably deserved to keep his place, and perhaps the presence of Henderson has actually seen De Gea, regroup, refocus, and not make the silly mistakes that he was making towards the back end of last season, which cast doubt on his suitability to continue as number one. So I think that's an issue. But again, we touched on this at the start as well. Henderson has played 2 EFL Cup games, and obviously last night in the Champions League. I don't think they play an EFL Cup game again until December, is it? Maybe mid to late December. So he's only going to play. Yeah, he's only going to play 3 games for Manchester United this calendar year until the turn of the year. Now that can't be good for his England prospects, as you guys have said.
Yeah.
Crossy, if you were Southgate, would you not give Henderson a game against the Irish just to take a look at him?
Yeah, I would. I would. I'd also be looking. Listen, I think that Gareth Southgate, of all the three keepers, probably rates Henderson as the biggest prospect. I do. But he doesn't know, and he can't turn to him because he's not playing regularly. I just feel that, at the moment, there's a sort of a sense of unfulfillment. He could play him against the Irish, and maybe he might. I think he'll definitely, change a few against the Irish, and so maybe that'll give Henderson the opening. But for Henderson, he must be thinking, "Where's my career going with this one?" Because as we all discussed, he's so ambitious. And you need that. You do need that as a goalkeeper. You need that self-belief.
Don't forget though that when England,
I think we're back to a pretty not great place. Whereas I think the goalkeepers are coming along nicely. Thank you.
When we went to Russia in 2018, Pickford had only won 2 or 3 caps. So it's not beyond Southgate to throw someone in. I mean, and Pickford obviously was great in Russia, helped us get to the last 4. So who knows? Yeah,
no, absolutely. Guys, final subject. I'm going to look at the game of the weekend. Man City, Liverpool. And I kind of, I want a few memories of this one. And then basically, the best game to date, really. Because I don't know about you guys, but is this the new Arsenal Man United sort of the early noughties when basically that was the title decider? Is this still the title decider? It certainly has been the last 2 or 3 seasons. But the way City have started, and I don't know, but what's your best memory of these games, and what decides it on Sunday, Disco?
I think what decides it on Sunday is how Liverpool cope with the lack of defensive personnel. Obviously Van Dijk's missing, Fabinho's missing. I think he played young 19-year-old Reece Williams the other night, didn't he? Who looked really good, and I think that's all credit to Klopp for putting faith, although. He probably hasn't got many other options. Putting faith in such a young defender, I think that will be a key factor how Liverpool cope, with defensively with the loss of 2 key defenders. And I think for City as well, it's a must-win game. They're already 5 points behind. I know we're in the early stages of a very turbulent and strange season, where there are going to be lots of twists and turns, and it's not going to be the usual 2-horse race as it has been the last 3 seasons, where Liverpool and City streak away from everybody, and it's a battle between the 2 of them. You won't see anywhere near the points total that they've amassed in the last 3 seasons. I think it'll be nudging 90 points to probably win the league this season. Because of the points they've dropped already and the injuries they've both suffered. So I think I do think City and Liverpool will finish 1 or 2. I don't know in which order, but I do think if those are the 2 teams still to beat. Is it a title decider? No, because there is a lot of scope. We're only 6-7 games in, so there's a lot of scope and games to be played. But I do think City can't afford to fall too far behind Liverpool. 5 points already. That becomes a psychological gap that, whilst they can bridge it, you don't want to be letting Liverpool have any kind of lead, even accounting for the injury problems they've got.
Yeah, Jeremy, I mean, we've already had some super games between these 2. I mean, City certainly had the final say, didn't they, at the end of last season in that game at the Etihad, really. Are they finally matched? It's, are they sort of equally poised at the moment, do you think?
They are. Look, 2 seasons ago, that finish to the season was absolutely remarkable. I don't think you'll ever see a season like that. City pipped them by a point. They won the last 14 games, I think, to beat Liverpool to the title. Yeah, they are. They've both got their injury issues. Obviously, Aguero's missing for City, or has been. He's the suggestion he could be back in the squad on Sunday. He's been a big loss for them, and replacing him is going to be the next massive decision that the City owners have to make in probably next summer, actually. But yeah, there's not a lot to choose between them. I think Liverpool are a better drilled team at the minute. They seem to have more consistency. I don't know about Disco, but what thinks about City, but we see a lot of them, and they're playing okay. They're not blowing teams away. They played in the Champions League on Tuesday against Olympiacos, and they ended up winning 3-0. But in the second half, the game was evenly poised at 1-0. Olympiacos missed 2 or 3 openings to get an equaliser, and the result could have been so much different. I just don't think City have that fear factor anymore that they had two or 3 seasons ago. And I don't know why. I think they've made some poor signings. they've not replaced good players with the same level of player, if you know what I mean. But look, there's little to choose between them, and you can never write off City because they've got so much world-class quality in that team. And I think the game, listen, if City, Disco's right, City can't afford to lose. A draw wouldn't be a disaster, but we've got a game in hand, obviously, on Liverpool. So if they beat Liverpool on Sunday, win the game in hand, they'll be above Liverpool. So there's a long way to go. It's a tough one. Don't ask me who's going to win, because I don't know. It'll be cagey, obviously. I hope it's a great game. We've seen some absolute belters between these two down the years. And it's a great rivalry. It's just a shame that Klopp and Guardiola don't argue a bit more.
Andy, I'm going to finish with you, if I may. And I'm going to ask you for a prediction, really, and see how you go and see how you think the game will actually pan out too.
I think Liverpool will win the game and Liverpool will win the league, and I just do not get this. Honestly, I haven't checked them this morning. I don't check them every morning, but I still see Manchester City slightly ahead of Liverpool every time I look in the odds for the Premier League. It is just baffling. I mean, Liverpool are a huge step ahead of Manchester City. And anyone who says otherwise, I just do not get their reasoning. Okay, Liverpool have had one aberration at Aston Villa away, and it really was a freakish aberration. But they are better defensively. They are better organised. I mean, City still concede daft goals at crucial times. And you know what? You spoke about great games between Man City and Liverpool, but I remember the second leg of the European game 2 years ago when Liverpool had already won the first leg. Was it 3-0? I think they won the first leg.
3-0, yeah.
And Jesus scored early on in the return leg. It was a great atmosphere. And they could have got level. Did they have a decision go against them, City, towards the end of the first half? I can't remember exactly what it was, but they might have got them to 2-0. And then Liverpool in the second half come out, and it was the guy we were talking about before. He scored, I think Salah and Firmino scored to make it 2-1. It just sort of symbolised to me how, you mentioned that result of the Etihad towards the end of last season. That's when Liverpool were already champions, and they were hung over that game, if you remember. I mean, literally and metaphorically, they were hung over that game. Andy Robertson, famously was like, zigzagging down the wing, not in an intentional sort of way.
They weren't the only ones, Crossy, were they?
So, and I just think that Klopp has got a bit of a hold over Guardiola, and I think the team is just a better team all round. Listen, I think Manchester City are a more attractive team, and if you gave me, if you said, right, you've got to spend £20 to watch one or the other, I'd probably watch City. But if you said to me, who's the better team, and you've got £20 to bet on them, it would be Liverpool. And I genuinely think that they are still City, still just so, I don't know, susceptible to giving the odd daft goal away, and that will cost them. And I think Liverpool will win. I would suggest that actually, now I mention that European game, I wouldn't be surprised to see a repeat of that scoreline: City 1, Liverpool 2.
Well, Donny, do you not think that the loss of Van Dijk, which is looking like for a sustained period, and Fabinho, is a kind of levelling up in the sense? Because City have strengthened in that area, haven't they? They've got Diaz in, who looks a really good signing, and Laporte, and that looks like the foundation or the basis of a really good central defensive partnership. It does.
This guy, it's funny. I went to Leeds Man City, and Diaz. Was it that game? No. Sorry. I'm getting totally confused. City against Porto, when Diaz gave the ball away for the first goal, and I thought to myself, there is City been crying out, or we've been crying out, or pundits or the public have been crying out? City need a no-nonsense centre half. With Diaz looks, doesn't he? He looks a traditional no-nonsense centre half, just does the basics, strong, good in the air, gets rid. But then Pep will try and get him to play like Beckenbauer, won't he? And then when he starts trying to pass the ball around, there's a mistake in there. So, I do agree with that, Disco. But the thing is, what you would say, since Van Dijk's been out, they haven't really looked back, Liverpool, have they?
Yeah.
And they tend to defend from the front. Yeah. So basically, they're not. When Gomez is exposed, as he was maybe early on against West Ham and made that mistake, when the likes of Gomez and the fullbacks are exposed, they might be vulnerable. However, they just defend so well up top. Those three set the tempo for that defending. The midfield follows suit, and they're very, very rarely vulnerable. So, yes, it is a loss, obviously, but I think they've shown they're going to cope with it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What's your prediction, John?
Oh, my prediction. I'm going to sit horribly on the fence here and think it's
here we go
going to be a draw.
Crossy.
I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. I'd love to see City come back and be real challengers, but I don't see it this season. I don't see it this season. I think they really needed to back Guardiola, and yes, they have done that to a degree. But I think the uncertainty over Guardiola's long-term future, I don't think their transfer business it was as dynamic and as exciting as I thought and hoped it might be to kind of make it a really tight title race again. But I do think that Liverpool have got issues at the back, so they will concede goals. But I still think that Liverpool win the league and ultimately be a better team than City. But I'm not even sure that City will be Liverpool's closest challengers this season, which is a shame. No, I tell you what about Leicester?
Yeah.
Absolutely flying. You know, I mean, it's incredible. Tottenham.
Yeah, did a column on that
Tottenham Tottenham on the blind side a little bit.
I think it's going to be a great season because it's so unpredictable. There's mad results. I mean, obviously you've got to fancy Liverpool to win the title. I'm sure they will, but there's going to be 4 or 5 or 6 other clubs jostling around underneath, so should be good.
Liverpool winning by 10 points.
Yeah, I think Liverpool.
I mean, Liverpool will win it, but I think Liverpool will win it. And I know it's great, but I don't see them not winning it by a handsome margin again.
No, I think it'll be a fascinating season, guys. That's it. Thanks so much indeed for joining me, and thanks everyone out there for watching as well. So really appreciate you joining us. So plenty to discuss, and we'll look back and look forward. So really appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed for everyone's company, and see you again, same time, same place next week.